Ladies and gentlemen, don't discount the fact that creative financing, and specifically owner financing, what it can do for you, your investments, and your long-term success in real estate. We're buying real estate through owner financing, and this is the best way to buy real estate, hands down. My first building that I bought back in 2000 was through the means of owner financing. I still utilize owner financing to buy one-off lots, to be able to buy land, build houses, and it offsets, right, your expenses. And so one of the best and most advantageous things about owner financing is it keeps cash in your pocket. And like I always tell people, liquidity is king, because the more liquidity you have, the more leverage you have. The more leverage you have, the more deals you can take down. The more deals you can take down, the more money you can make. The more money you can make, the stronger your business and your financial foundation is, no matter what you do. And so let me go through the terms that I actually negotiate when I do owner financing, and let me explain to you guys why owner financing is so advantageous. Owner financing is when the owner of a property themselves become the bank. And so what ends up happening through the means of owner financing is, instead of going through a bank, you utilize the ownership of that asset from the person who actually has the deed on that property. So like for a piece of land where banks don't typically lend money, you utilize the homeowner as the finance company for that land. So where most people sit back and go, well, Jerome, how do I go out and buy a piece of land? Go in and owner finance it. If you go in, ladies and gentlemen, and you have like an old distressed asset, one of the ways that we've made a ton of money in real estate is through old distressed retail and office buildings. We've repositioned them into multifamily. We've repositioned them and renovated them, made them substantially nicer, putting new storefront facades on them. And we've purchased the vast majority of them through owner financing. Most people complicate how to go out and buy real estate. We used it as a business tool. One thing that most people know about me is I own a concrete company, and being in the construction trade, the winters always get cold, especially in the Southwest where we live at the foothills of the Rocky Mountains. And so when we go in the winter and there's snow on the ground, and people don't want to pour concrete in the middle of the winter, and so our crews get slow. So instead of laying off our crews every September, I would just go out, and I didn't even think about it. Most people complicate, like, oh my God, I'm going to buy a retail building, and they complicate the process of buying real estate. I would just start looking for real estate in September. And what I would do is drive around areas that were near my office, near my home, and I would just look for empty buildings that were distressed, either boarded up or had been for sale for a long time. I'd go in, I'd talk to the brokers. An empty building is worth zero to a bank. And the reason it's worth zero to the bank is because that building doesn't cash flow. When the building doesn't cash flow, it doesn't pay for itself. So they're independently looking at you, the individual, as the guarantor for that loan. So instead of going in and putting your own personal liability at risk, having to put a larger down payment down on that property, the owner can finance that property for you. And so a lot of times it just takes a slight education of letting the owners know of that building that they themselves can be the bank on your behalf. And what's good about that for the owners is a couple different things. One, it offsets their long-term capital gains taxes. So instead of them going in and becoming just the bank, and instead of them getting all that money from the bank, then they have to pay capital gains taxes on that asset. So if they sell that asset for $1 million with capital gains taxes, $400,000 of that is potentially going to capital gains taxes. So if they owner finance it for you, the only thing they're paying taxes on is the amount that they're charging you in interest payment only, or the down payment amount. So the way I negotiate the down payment amount to go down, where most commercial investments, the banks want a minimum of 20% down. In today's current environment, sometimes the banks want as much as 35% down. So to be able to limit your cost and liability in any purchase, you can go in with owner financing and negotiate a 10% down payment or less. And the benefit to them is that the lower amount that you pay, the less tax liability that they have, so they can offset their long-term capital gains taxes, and they don't have to pay as much. All they're doing is they're creating a revenue stream for themselves. How are they creating a revenue stream for themselves? Because of this right here. You're willing to pay them someplace between 0% and 8% interest on that. Now, obviously, they have no income if you're paying them 0%. So a lot of times with owner financing, people are asking for more money than the asset is actually worth. But if you understand that even if you pay less money for the finished bottom line price of that asset, let me give you an example. If you go in and let's say you buy that building, it's $1 million through owner financing, and they're stubborn at owner financing, but that property itself is only worth $900,000. Why would you pay $1 million for a property that's only worth $900,000? So if they over leverage me on the price, I'll sit back and say, okay, let me get this place leased up. And once I get it leased up, I'm going to have larger cash flow. But while I lease it up for the next 12 months, while I renovate, stabilize, get that property stabilized, give me 0% for the first 12 months. And then after 12 months, I'll pay you 4% the second year and then 8% the third year. Or I'll just say 0% for 3 years, depending on what I'm doing. So it all depends on leverage, right? Because if I'm overpaying for a $1 million asset and you're paying interest, let's say of an average interest rate on a piece of land is going to be about 8%. So if you take $1 million times 8%, that's $80,000 a year. So you take $80,000 and you divide that by 7, that's $11,428 a month, okay? That's going to be your payment. So if you're going to pay that much a month, $80,000 in 1 year with 0% interest almost gets you back to what the value of that asset is. So you can either go in and get 0% for 1 year and then take it at a 4%. And at 4%, you're only paying $40,000. You're making $20,000 more than you would taking the price down to $900,000. So some people get fixated on the price. They're going, I need that $900,000 value because that's all it's worth. I'm not paying a penny more. I'm not going to pay your $1 million. I go, why? We can go set them up with a 3-year call, a 3 or a 5-year call. You can negotiate 0% interest for the first 12 months, pay nothing, then to stair-step it on your second year to 4% interest, and then your third year, 8% interest. You may not even have that asset tied up under owner financing for longer than a few months. And the reason why is because you're going to negotiate no early payoff penalties. What that means is that if you have that loan for 6 months and then you find better terms through a bank, you don't have no payoff penalties. It doesn't cost you anything to pay that loan off. It doesn't cost you anything to pay that $1 million off. Yes, you negotiated with the owner to offset their long-term capital gains with the expectation potentially that it would take 3 to 5 years to pay that asset off, but then you also negotiated no early payoff penalties. So if the terms work better for you, ladies and gentlemen, this is business. The reason you put these terms set in there is because this is business. At the end of the day in business, the goal is to make money and make your business as strong as humanly possible. The stronger your foundation, the stronger your business. So we negotiate no early payoff penalties. We'll go in and say, let me pay interest only when it does escalate so that you don't have the principal payments, because the goal is to be able to get a long-term stabilized loan on an asset that is cash producing. So what I would do with my buildings is I would go in, I would spend 3 months in the winter renovating them. So if I found a building in September, October, by the time I closed on the building, it's November. That's about when the first snow starts to come, is in early December, and we slow down right around Thanksgiving. That's when construction companies slow down. So you get to mid-November when Thanksgiving hits, and then all the way until the second week of January, we're always slow, and typically all the way till the end of January. So if we have the end of November, December, January, and into mid-February to renovate a building, that gives us 3 months to renovate that building. So by February, we start lease up. Let's say it takes us 60 days to find good tenants. Where do I find good tenants? On retail stuff, I go next door and I knock on the doors of every single business that's in that area. I walk in, 9 times out of 10, the business owner is actually sitting and working in that business. And 9 times out of 10, they're not happy with the building they're in. So if I can give them a better product, a better building, a better place to have their business at a very similar lease rate, maybe slightly more because of how nice our property looks at the end of lease up, we go in and we say, hey, Mr. Business Owner, Mrs. Business Owner, how about coming over to our building? What are you paying currently in rent? Oh, you're paying $1,300 a month in rent and you have a 1,000 square foot building? Why don't we give you more square footage? Could you benefit from an extra 300 square feet? And what if we gave that to you at $1,500 a month for the first 12 months? It's only $200 more than you're paying right now, but you have a newer building, electrical is updated, it's brand new painted. We'll give you 30 days free rent so you can move your stuff over, and then you get a tenant in there that's a long-term tenant, and you sign them up on a 3 to 5 year lease that escalates by 3 to 5% every single year. Now you have a tenant that is cash flowing. And as you do that, you can go in and you can buy out of this balloon payment by just getting a long-term stabilized loan from a bank. And then you can get a bank loan. It may be 6% through an SBA loan, or you can go and get a HUD loan on your property, get it at 6%, and you can go in and get better terms. Once you do that and you've exercised the best terms that you can from the means of owner financing, now you have a cash producing asset. You can either keep the owner financing for up to 5 years, or you can go out and you can get better terms through a bank. And so the benefit to owner financing is you have no credit checks. You can go in and opt out of no credit checks because you're not dealing with a bank. You're dealing with an individual, somebody who owns the asset. So you could go in and you get better leverage. Even if you go out and you maximize all of your debt to income ratio, and the banks would otherwise say, hey, this is too risky, because you're too over leveraged because you own too many assets. You could sit back and because there's no credit checks, they're not vetting that stuff. You have less liability. You have no early payout penalties. Not going to affect your credit. You can leverage more assets and grow. This is a great way to grow your net worth and grow the basis of your asset holdings is through owner financing. So what we'll do is we get better leverage through owner financing and better terms. Now, the terms that we negotiate are the ones that I talked about earlier, where typically the best terms that I negotiate is this right here. What am I paying in interest? How am I paying this interest? How do I get to a place where I get the asset for the real price that I want? Now, it was a $900,000 purchase price is the value. I pay $1 million. I take 2 years of that, 1 year at 0% interest, the second year at 4% interest. And at the end of the day, I land up saving $120,000 in interest payment through negotiation of better terms. A bank's not going to do that for you. They're not going to lend you money at 0% for a year. Now, if you have a good credit card or a line of credit, sometimes to be able to lure you in to get credit from them, they'll do this. But if you slip up one time, it incurs all the interest all the way back to the beginning of that loan with traditional banks and traditional lending. So why not just position yourself where you go in, you get owner financing, you do a 60-day default clause in there to benefit the seller. So you do a 60-day default clause, and that 60-day default clause says, hey, if you don't pay us after 60 days, we can take our asset back and we can keep your down payment money. So don't default on the asset. Just go in there, get that thing renovated, and then in February, March, like we did every winter, we would just stabilize the asset. We'd either lease it and keep it in cash flow, or we would sell it. Depends on how much of a pain in the ass it was to be able to lease that asset. If the tenants were very complicated, hard, really the terms and the creditworthiness of them was subpar, we would just sell the building because that's the demographics that area actually brought to us. But the vast majority of the time, we'd find in very good tenants and we would just keep them. That's how we acquired over 1 million square feet of retail over the course of time, about 90% of that being through the means of owner financing, either on the land or on the asset itself. Ladies and gentlemen, don't discount the fact that creative financing and specifically owner financing, what it can do for you, your investments, and your long-term success in real estate. And ladies and gentlemen, when you understand how to leverage assets and money, that's how you'll compound your success. If you're watching this on repeat, then put comment in the comment section, #repeat.